All right, so you should have your notes, should be complete already, and have your practice open. We are first going to look at the notes. Like I said, they should already be done. I'm not going to rediscuss them or anything, but do you have any questions? Anything I need to clarify? Anything I need to re-explain? Something that didn't make sense? You got to speak up. Okay, I will tell you a couple of things that were asked today, just in case you hadn't thought about them, or I just want to make sure it's fine here. So somebody did ask about the simplifying the square roots. That is something that you should be capable of doing. I do want to at least say that if the way you were taught and the only way you ever think about it is that you're looking for the biggest perfect square that divides into the number to take out, there's nothing wrong with it, and that's not a wrong way to do it. But if that's the only way you think about it, then that can get you into some trouble. With 20, hopefully finding the biggest perfect square that divides into that isn't complicated, right, because it's 4. But if I gave you a number like 486, do you automatically know what the biggest perfect square that divides into there is? Probably not. I mean, maybe somebody does because they have it. Most of us probably not. So I don't want you sitting there and guessing at numbers like, oh, let's see if 16 does. Let's see if 25 does. You're wasting your time. If you don't just know, then just start with your factor tree until you get it down to things that you do know. Does that make sense to you? Otherwise, it's really just kind of a waste of your time. You could have been done if you did the factor tree. So are we good on simplifying square roots? We can do that okay? I think I will put a square root review in Schoology that's optional. Like if you feel like you need it because you're rusty on it or you don't even know what I'm talking about, then you can do that. The other thing that came up a few times was the graph on number 7. When I went to go plot a point, I used my anchor point of -2, -8, and then went down off the graph, but said I don't actually get to plot this point because it's not in the domain. Is everybody okay with that? Do I need to re-explain that? Do you understand why I can't plot it? Yes or no? Yes. And if it's a no, it's okay. Okay. Because my domain is between -1 and 2. And if I go to -2, if I go to -2 and I translate back over, whatever. But if I go to -2 and just go straight down, that x value of -2 isn't in this domain. I only get to start at that point on the graph. Okay? So we're all good with that? Okay, so at the beginning of the year, this thing worked well yesterday, and now it just keeps drooping. It's driving me crazy. At the beginning of the year, I was having you do practice and then also an assignment, because those practices really were pretty quick. They shouldn't have taken that long, and I wanted you to practice more. And I always think the more practice, the better. It's hard for me to dial things back. But things like this, it's going to take a little bit longer. So I definitely don't want you to be, you can, but I don't want to make everybody all the time, do the notes and do this long practice and do an assignment. That's too much, and I know it's too much. So the practice on this, and probably most of the other stuff that we do, if there's a practice in there, it's going to be sort of optional. I say sort of because we're going to do a couple quick things together today, but then you can go and do more if you want and check the answer keys in there too. If you feel like you got it and you don't need to look at it, that's fine. If you just want to look at the answer key and think about how things were worked out, whatever. But it's just there if you feel like you need more practice, okay? So once we go over a couple of things in the practice together, then you'll be able to work on your Delta Math. I'm going to have to give you a couple of hints on that. And then if you finish that, you can get your notes done for Monday. And then, as far as your notes for Monday, because they are on today's checklist, so I adjusted that so it wouldn't be as confusing, because I think I was making it too confusing. But I didn't make the due date. It's on today's checklist, but the due date isn't tonight at midnight, because we're not doing it tomorrow, so it doesn't need to be. It's Sunday at midnight. But it's on today's checklist, and I didn't know how to do that and not make it confusing, so I just left it that way. So the checklist, I want you turning it in because I want to know you're looking at it, and I think a lot of you really are using it, so it's for you to help you. As long as you know that it's on today's checklist and you just have to make sure you get it done by Sunday, then you're fine. You're just going to kind of figure that out on your own, all right? But don't feel like you have to get everything done today. All right, so let's look at the practice. We are going to just do a couple of these quick ones, and more so for what shows up, so we can talk about some things. So we're going to do number 2B. Okay. So when I am evaluating for a piecewise, I have to figure out what domain this number lives in. So these are all the values less than -7. It doesn't live in there. This is between -7 and 5, so that's where 4 lives, in that domain. That's how I know it's this part that I'm substituting it into. Okay, and now I made this, I think I made it pretty clear in the notes that you're supposed to be doing today, but I don't know how much I've really set it up until now, is that I know that you are capable of, when you're substituting it in, you know 3 times 4 is 12, and you could write 12 down, but that's a bad idea, okay? The process is so much more important than the answer. If you can look at this number and this, and bam, you have the final answer in your head because you're like a number wizard, fantastic, amazing, nobody cares, you're not getting credit, okay? So it's not a bad thing to have, but you have to show your process. So first step should be 0 work, and we substitute it in. So I'm going to take this 4, put it in here. I'm going to get the square root of 3 times 4 plus 15. And as silly as that may seem, that's important. Because let's say that this was a more complicated problem, and after you substitute it in, you have no clue what to do with it. Well, guess what? You would still get some of the credit because at least you knew how to use it. You with me on that? Or have you ever done something absolutely ridiculous like 3 times 4 is 7? Even though you know it's multiplication, but for some reason your brain added, like those things happen. And if you use a 7 there and you didn't show that part, then we think you have no clue what you're doing. Where this shows, okay, I know what I'm doing. You do not have to show every single step. Right now you want to skip a bunch of steps? Great. 3 times 4 is 12 plus 15 gives me the square root of 27. No decimals, right? I don't want a calculator on this. We should be able to simplify that. And that's not a crazy tough one. When I simplify that, what do I get? Ooh, close. 3 square root of 3. Oh, okay. I gotcha. Okay, everybody okay with all that? And just as a little tip on that, I mean, hopefully we get to a point where you probably didn't even need to write anything down for this one, but when I split this up and I get 3 times 9, I see that perfect square, I could stop there. But if this is one where you kind of need to do the whole factor tree because things aren't popping up for you, then the way I do it, and I think it's probably the safest way, is I would circle my prime numbers, like if I go make the tree all the way, and then after I do that, I look for pairs. And I have 2 3s, that comes out as a 3. This one doesn't have a pair, he stays inside. Okay, and the more consistent you are with that also, the better off you are. The more number sense you're comfortable with, these things become easier, like everything just comes a little bit smoother to you. Okay, we all good with that? All right, let's look at number 4b. So I have 8 over 15. This here is negatives less than -5. These are negatives between those two. So this is the only domain that has positive numbers. So that's where this lives. So I substitute it in. 3/2 times 8 over 15 plus 7. Right. Now multiplying fractions is simple. We just multiply straight across, but I'm not going to do that because I can even simplify it more for myself. I can reduce a little bit. 2 goes into 2 once, goes into 8 4 times. 3 goes into 3 once, goes into 15 5 times. Okay. And so at this point, I don't need to do anything with those fractions, really, because this is now 1. So this is 4/5 plus 7. Now, when we came up with a fraction plus a whole number, and when we were graphing, I said, go ahead and leave it as 5.5. That's fine, because we're graphing, it makes sense. But when you're coming up with values, we really don't use mixed numbers for anything. Anything besides cooking. Unless it's given to us, we don't even want those. So we need this to be an improper fraction. When we add fractions, what do we have to have? Same denominator. So what would my common denominator be here? 5, yeah? And then what would my numerator be on this one? 35. So then when I add them, I'm going to get f of 8 over 15 equals, so my denominator is still 5 and my numerator is what? Was 4 plus 35? 39. I know I'm asking the really hard questions. Okay. So add, subtract, multiply, divide fractions. Could a calculator have helped you with that? Yes, but you shouldn't be using one. But we're going to get ones where the calculator is going to do nothing for you. You have to know the rules in order to be able to get through what you need to get through. Okay. Any questions on any of those, on how to know the domain or anything? Okay. So let's keep wanting to say flip over on the back. Go to the next page, however you get to the next page. And we're going to look at number 8. Okay, so when I graph this, I have 3 pieces. This first piece is the square root function, so I'm going to draw my little graph here. And the first thing I want to do is graph my endpoint. So this -4 goes in here. -4 plus 3 is -1. -1, -1 is 1, so it ends up being 1. So I go to -4, 1, and it's an open circle. Okay? And it's an open circle because of this. Sorry, I thought I had a question to ask. Everybody good with that? So now I'm going to start with my anchor points. I would start with 0, 0. So I'm going to put my pencil on 0, 0. I reflect in the y-axis, so it goes nowhere. And then I go to the left, 1, 2, 3. Do I get to actually put a point here? What do you think? Can I plot here? I'll put it and I'll erase it if I have to. Is that point an okay point for what I'm doing? No. It is part of the graph. Remember, I'm not getting all of the graph. This is not in my domain. My domain is everything less than -4. So even though, yeah, I ended up there, I don't get to use that. Okay. My next anchor point is 1, 1. I reflect in the y-axis, go to the left 4. I end up on my open circle, which sometimes you'll end up on your endpoints, not always, but okay, there's 1. So next I go to 4, 2. I reflect in the y-axis, move to left 1, 2, 3, and this is a legit point, and I'm good. One of the many reasons I want you to have this little picture drawn is so you don't lose sight of what that shape is. Because I'm not going to connect those and make it like a line segment, all right? And it's a curve, and I know that it reflected in the y-axis, so it was curving this way, it's now going to curve that way. That helps me get the shape of this. And it's not super curvy because it's stretched out, but it's something. As long as it doesn't look like you intended to draw a line, then we're good. It's not an art class, and I know you're drawing in Cami and whatever, okay? Everybody okay with that piece? All right, so let's look at piece number 2. This is the absolute value. All right, so there's my absolute value function. I'm going to get my endpoints on there, right? So -4 must substitute it in here, so that'll give me the absolute value of -8 minus 7 is 1. So I'm going to go to -4, 1, and I'm in the same open circle. So the open circles just overlap. So let's talk about what happened if it wasn't an open circle. If this was equals to, so I was going to plot a closed circle right there. I had the open one. I plot the closed one right on top of it, so it's like they snap together, okay? So it will change an open to a closed, but if it was closed and I put an open one around it, if it's closed, it's closed. That doesn't go and open it, okay? So you can close an open circle, but you can't open a closed circle. And that probably makes sense if you think about domain and stuff. All right, so let me get the other endpoint. 1 times 2 is 2 minus 5. So this is 1, -5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is open as well. So since this is just a piece of that absolute value, I don't know yet which piece. It's possible that it just gets the left arm, so that'll look like a line segment, or maybe it still looks like a V. I don't know. When on the other graphing stuff, when I did the anchor points, I always went from left to right because I think it's, again, better to be consistent so we don't leave something off. But you don't have to go left to right. Just make sure you do them all. In a case like this, I think I would rather start with the minimum so I know if the minimum's actually in there and will it actually look like a V. Could help me. So I'm going to start at 0, 0. I have a horizontal compression by 1/2, so I do nothing. Then I go down 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's my minimum point. And it's still going to look like a V no matter what, no matter how much it shrinks, whatever. Might be an upside down V, but if I was graphing this all by itself, I would need to graph a couple other anchor points, but that's just so I get the shape of my graph and I know I'm accurate. Do I have to actually plot any more points to be able to get that in there accurately? What do you think? Can I just connect these and it would look like it needs to look? It's actually fine because these are parts of a line, right? And it only takes 2 points to graph a line, so it's fine. Because if I put this one in here and another one in here, it would just pass through it. Now, if it was a curve, that would be different. I might need something else to help me with the curve. But I'm good. I can tell what's happening with the V. I know somebody told me the line tool, it's under shapes, I think, for you. Shapes, and then you can find it. I cheat a different way, so it's this. And if you did plot other points, there's nothing wrong with it. So if you did, they're there, and if they're accurate, you're fine. You just didn't necessarily need them. So it's fine to do extra. Just make sure you always do at least enough. Alrighty. So now, any questions on that one? All right. Now on the third part. This is linear. So I substitute in my 1. That's going to give me a 2. So I'm going to go to 1, 2, and that is a closed circle. I don't need to do anything fancy for a line. I have one of the points. I know what the slope is. So from here, I can go up 3 over 1, make a point, and then I can connect these. So there's my funky looking graph. What questions do you have at this point? Okay, maybe one day you'll talk to me. All right, domain. Is my domain all real numbers? What do you think? No, right? Okay, so do I start out at negative infinity? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to start at negative infinity. And then so I'm going along here, I'm at negative infinity, and then boom, I hit here. And that negative 4, there is not an x value of negative 4 on my graph. So that's as far as I can get on the first part. I don't include it because there's not a circle there, right? And then I have to union it, and I start over the other part. So then as I keep going along my domain, when I get here, this x value isn't accounted for right here, but it is right here, right? So it's fine, it counts, and I keep going. So the rest of it is continuous all the way to infinity. All right? We all good with that? Would it help you to sit here? I just see how you're squinting. I just want to make sure you can see. Oh, okay, okay. Oh, it's fine. I'm not trying to call you out. I just want to make sure you were in a place where you could see. Okay. All right, so then my range. Is my range all real numbers? No. Where do I start? Negative 7. Do I include negative 7? Yes. And I've had hesitation from a lot of people today on that. So you ask yourself, do I have a y value of negative 7? Yes. Well, then you have to include it, right? So then as I go up here, so I'm going up, this isn't accounted for here, but it is here, so I'm good. So you can keep on going. Then when I get here, this isn't accounted for here or anywhere else. There's not a y value of negative 7. I'm sorry, there's not a y value of 1 anywhere on this graph. So I'm only going from negative 7 to 1, not including it, starting over at 1. But then here, as I go up, everything is taken care of all the way to infinity. Okay? What questions do we have? All right. Do I have any discontinuities? Yes. What kind? Okay. I heard jump and point and removable. All right, so let's do jump. It doesn't matter which one we do first. So jump at x equals 1. And then I heard point or removable. And that's at x equals negative 4. Now, I had trouble earlier today getting these words out of some classes, right? Because they're like, oh, I know it's discontinuity, but what is it? So if you learn to ask yourself the same kinds of questions I do, you can usually dig it out of your brain. So I said, all right, well, what happened to this point here? They're like, it was removed. All right, so it's removable. What was removed? A point. It's a point. So they were saying the words without even realizing they knew what they were talking about. So just keep those in mind. You can think your way through it, okay? What questions do we have? Anything? All right, so like I said, if you want to do some of the other ones and check it on the key that's in Schoology, you can, but you don't have to. If you're like, I get this, I'm good, then you can move on to Delta Math. On the Delta Math, with the, there's two different parts where you graph. The more, quote, complicated graphing, it's not that complicated, but it's actually way easier to do. The piecewise functions that are all linear, the directions are there, but it's kind of leaving off a couple of things that I think are kind of important because I had to play with it and figure it out. So it's going to have, you're going to be able to click on to draw the line, the closed circle, and the open circle, right? So if you go and you put your closed circle, and then maybe you plot another point, another point so you can get your shape or whatever, then you're good. So when you draw the line through it, it actually only draws a line segment. But if you leave it like that, it counts it wrong. But it doesn't tell you how to get an arrow. On the end of it where you want the arrow, if you click on the end point a couple of times, it'll toggle through and you'll get an arrow, okay? The other thing that I messed up, that it messed me up and I didn't even realize it, is I plotted an open circle. I went and drew in my line, made my little arrow and everything, but when I drew in the line, because I had to click on it, it closed my circle. So before you hit submit, make sure everything you intended to be open is still open and it didn't change because you were drawing a line or something. Then the last thing a couple people were having issues with, myself included at first, was that when you draw that line, so let's just say that like I have this point and this point, right? So if I draw it through here, if I lean it one way or the other, I may not be able to get it back where I need. So if the slope here is like up 2 over 1, then you got to make sure you go through another up 2 over 1 type of thing before you let go, or it's going to be a tiny bit off and it thinks you don't know what you're doing. So if you get an answer and it looks like the added points for you, that means your slope wasn't really, really right. So just be careful with those things so you're not having to redo them over and over again. I didn't intend for it to be that complicated. It seemed like it worked right. There's only 3 of those, so it's fine. But anything else? All right. And don't forget about test corrections if you haven't already done the stuff to make that happen. So now you can work on your Delta Math or work on this or get your notes done, whatever it is that you need, okay? And then ask me questions. Talk to me. It's okay. And yeah, we'll get it done.